Hi! In this course, you will learn everything about how to program the BIOS IC of any computer. In this crash course, I will answer these questions in detail. What is the BIOS? How the BIOS works? What are the faults that require programming the BIOS chip? What do we need to program the BIOS chip? How to program the BIOS chip? What is the programmer and where can we get it? What is the BIOS software? And how do I choose the best one? What is the firmware? And which programming language is used to write a BIOS program? Why we need the bin file or hex file to program the BIOS? Where can we get the bin or binary files? What are the best and cheapest programmer? And where can I buy it? How can I convert AXA file or executive file to bin file or binary file? What is the types of BIOS? Understanding the BIOS pin configuration and circuit diagram. Where can I download the BIOS firmwares? And much more. Note: because BIOS programming is one of the most sensitive maintenance operations, I will be in touch with any student who enrolls in this course. I'm going to help you in the process of programming the BIOS chip until a full understanding of BIOS programming. I will help you choose the right programmer for you if you don't have it. I will help you choose the appropriate firmware for your BIOS chip. I'm going also to help you prepare the programmer, choose the appropriate adapter, understand BIOS software. I will teach you how to save a backup copy of your original firmware and all other steps until the computer is working. So, what are you waiting for? Enroll now and let's get started. BIOS, or Basic Input-Output System, is a program that is charged to start the computer system after it is powered on. It also manages the data flow between the computer's operating system and attached devices, such as the hard disk drive, the keyboard, the mouse, and printer. The BIOS software is a group of instructions. It performs a self-test called POST, or Power on Self-Test, that helps to verify the computer hardware. If the computer does not pass the POST, you will hear a combination of beeps that indicate what is malfunctioning in the computer. Hi again. So in this lecture, I'm going to show you the place of the BIOS in the motherboard. So as you can see here, this is the laptop motherboard. Okay. Here in the motherboard, we have always the CPU. This is the GMCH. Here we have the ICH, or the circuit bridge. Okay. So always in the motherboard, in the laptop motherboard, you should look for the Super IO, the IO. So let's check here. We don't have the Super IO. So let's check the other side. As you can see, here we have the IO. This is the Super IO, as you can see. So usually the BIOS chip is near to the SIO, to the Super Input Output IC. Okay, so let's check here. We don't have the BIOS, so the BIOS should be in the other side of this IC. So let's check. So as you can see, this is the BIOS, as you can see here. Okay, let's check its reference. As you can see here, this is the BIOS reference. We have 25Q16BVS8G. 16, as you can see here, 16 means the capacity or the size of this BIOS is 60 megabit, means 2 megabytes. Okay, because 8-bit equal 1 byte. Okay, so always or usually you will find the BIOS near to the SIO, Super Input IO, or in the other side of this IC. Sometimes you can find the BIOS near to the ICH or to the circuit bridge. And sometimes we'll find that the ICH, the BIOS, and the Super IO is near to each other. So let's check another motherboard. I will show you the BIOS in many motherboards in order to go deeper into understanding the working principle of the BIOS. Here, as you can see, we have another motherboard. So this is the processor, as you can see here. So the processor with the GMCH and also the graphic card. Here we have just in this motherboard two chips, the big chip, this and this. So this is the ICH, or the circuit bridge, that is responsible for all the connectors and ports in the motherboard. Okay, here this part is the CPU, and here we have the GMCH and the graphic card. So the graphic card and the GMCH is integrated with the CPU, okay? Because this is a new motherboard. So let's check. Here we have the ICH, as you can see, and here we have the Super IO, as you can see. So I told you before that the BIOS should be always or usually near to the Super IO or to the ICH. So as you can see, this is the BIOS. You should distinguish between the BIOS and the MOSFET. Always the BIOS has a big chip than the MOSFET. Okay, so here we have the MOSFET, as you can see. and here we have the BIOS. The BIOS is bigger than the MOSFET. And sometimes in some motherboards, you will find the BIOS with a mark, a color here, or a paint. Okay, so let's check the reference of this BIOS. As you can see here, we have 25Q32, as you can see. So 25Q32, as you can see, BVSONG. So 32 means what? 32 megabit means 4 megabyte. Okay, 4 megabyte. Always you will find that the reference or the letter that is designed for the BIOS is U, exactly like an IC, because the BIOS is an IC. Okay, so let's check another motherboard. So we will check also this motherboard. So as you can see here we have the processor, as you can see. Here we have the GMCH with the graphic card. So the graphic card integrated with the GMCH. Here we have the ICH or the circuit bridge, and here we have the SIO or the Super IO. Okay, so the Super IO is the IC that is responsible for the power in the whole motherboard. Okay, so let's look for the BIOS. So as you can see, here we have the ICH, here we have the Super IO, and here we have the BIOS, as you can see. So this is a MOSFET or a simple IC, and this is the BIOS. Always the BIOS is greater or is bigger than MOSFETs and other ICs with 8 pins. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a color here. Okay, as you can see, this color means the BIOS. Okay, so here we have the 3 components are next to each other. So let's check another motherboard. So as you can see here, also in this motherboard, we have the processor here, we have the GMCH, as you can see here. So let's see the other side. So in the other side, as you can see, we have the ICH or the circuit bridge, and here we have the Super IO, as you can see. So let's look for the BIOS. The BIOS should be next to the circuit bridge or next to the SIO. So let's check. So as you can see, here we have the Super input output, here we have the BIOS. Do you see the difference between BIOS and ICs or MOSFETs? Do you see the difference? Always the BIOS is bigger. So this is the BIOS. This BIOS, as you can see, it seems that this BIOS is already removed from the motherboard and reprogrammed. As you can see here, this is a new soldering. Here we have a flux. So this BIOS is already reprogrammed. Okay, so this is the BIOS with 8 pins, as you can see, 8 pins. Always the pin number 1, as you can see, you will find the pin number 1 always is marked with a hole here, or as you can see, this mark means this is the pin number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Always the pin number 4 of the BIOS is connected to the ground, and the pin number 8 is connected to the VCC. That's equal to 3.3 volts. We will see all this in the schematics, and we will check the BIOS using the multimeter. Okay, so we will go step by step until you be a pro in the BIOS and how to reprogram it and its schematic, etc. Okay, so in this motherboard, as you can see, we have an old BIOS, as you can see. In the new motherboards, okay, we find just BIOSes with 8 pins. Okay, so also you can reprogram this BIOS using a programmer. I will show you all this in the next lectures. Hi, in this lecture I'm going to show you all about the BIOS sizes. So let's check this BIOS, for example. As you can see, we have 25Q32, okay, 32 BVS, 32. Okay, so in this BIOS we have 32, as you can see. 32 means 4 megabytes. The size of this BIOS is 4 megabytes. I will show you how I calculate this 4 megabytes. Okay, so 8 megabit equal 1 megabyte. Okay, why? Because 8 bit equal 1 byte. So 16 bit will equal to a byte, 32 bit will equal to 4 bytes, and 64 bit will equal to 8 bytes. That's why when you find here, as you can see, between Q and F, 8 means the IC size is 1 megabyte. 16 means 2 megabytes. 32 means 4 megabytes. And 64 means 8 megabytes. Always you should divide it by 8, as you can see. Because 8 bit equal 1 byte, so 8 megabyte divided, you should divide 8 by 8, we will get 1. 16 divided by 8, we will get 2. 32 divided by 8, we will get 4, and also here we will get 8. Okay, so let's check some BIOS's IC. So here, as you can see in this motherboard, this is the BIOS IC. So let's check its size. So let's check its size. As you can see here, so we have 25Q16, as you can see. So 25Q16 BVS. So here you can find here BVS or EEPROM, no problem. But always you should focus into two numbers after Q. Okay, so as you can see here in the BIOS, we have, as you can see, 25Q16. Okay, so 16 means 2 megabyte, as you can see. So 16 means 2 megabyte, because 16 means 2 megabyte. So this BIOS, if you want to reprogram this BIOS, you should reprogram it or flash it with a program flash that is equal to 2 megabyte or less than 2 megabyte. You cannot reprogram it with a flash more than 2 megabytes. You know why? Because the IC has as a maximum size 16 megabit, means 2 megabytes. Okay, so let's check another motherboard. So for example, for this motherboard, as you can see, we have here the BIOS. So let's check its reference and then its size. So as you can see here, we have 25Q32. Okay, Q32. So 32 here means 4 megabytes. Okay, 32 means 4 megabytes. And as you see in the BIOS, we have 25Q32 BVS. Okay, we can find here FWS or BVS. No problem. Always you should check or focus in the number after Q. Okay, so let's check again. So we have 25Q32. 32 megabit means 32 divided by 8 equal 4 megabits. Okay, so this is the working principle of the BIOS sizes. So for this, as you can see here, 1 means 1 megabit equal 128 kilobyte. 2, if you find 2 here, means 256 kilobyte. If you find 4, means 512 kilobyte. Okay, here also if you find 128 means 60 megabyte. Why? Because if you divide 128 by 8, you will find 16. Okay, why? Because 8 bit equal 1 byte. Okay, so 256 megabit equal 32 megabyte. But the most used BIOSes is the BIOSes IC with 8, 16, 32 and 64 megabit. Okay? So this is the main important tips that you should know about BIOS sizes, because if you want to reprogram the BIOS, you should first know about its size. Why? Because when you know about its size, you can compare between the BIOS size and the size of file, the flash file that you will use to program the BIOS. For example, if you have a BIOS with 2 megabytes, okay, for example, let's assume that here we have 16, okay, so we have 25 Q, okay, 16 BVS, this is just a reference, EG, okay, so we have 16, 16 means 2 megabytes, so this BIOS has 2 megabytes, okay, of size. So the file, okay, the file that we will usually find with bin extension, bin means binary, okay, binary, okay, so this file should be less than or equal 2 megabytes. This file that we want to use to flash this IC with this reference should be less than or equal to megabyte. Why? Because the maximum size of the BIOS IC, of this BIOS IC, is 2 megabytes. Okay, the same for example 32. Here the file should be less than or equal 4 megabytes, and so on. Okay, so first you should put the multimeter to the DC voltage to 20 volts and then press power button. So as you can see here, for example, in this motherboard, this is the BIOS chip, as you can see, with 8 pins. Okay, usually the BIOS is near to the super IO, as you can see. You will find usually the BIOS near to the super IO or near to the ICH. So let's plug the power adapter and then check the pin number 8 of the BIOS. As you see in the schematic, always you will find 3.3 volt in the pin number 8 of the BIOS without powering on the laptop. We have this dot here, means this is pin number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. So let's check pin number 8. So as you can see in the multimeter, we have 3.3 volt. So if you find that 3.3 volt in pin number 8 of the BIOS, but the laptop still does not working, means you should reprogram the BIOS, because about 90% the file or the firmware inside the BIOS is corrupted. So as you can see in the schematic, we have in the pin number 3 volt also. As you can see in the schematic, in the pin number 3 write protect, we have 3 volt. So let's check pin number 3. So 1, 2, 3, we should find 3 volt, as you can see. So pin number 4, we will find 0 volt because the pin number 4 is connected to the ground. So let's check the clock. So the clock exists in pin number 6. So we have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is pin number 6. So let's check. Here we have 1.5 volt. Okay. So the clock is okay. So the power of the BIOS seems okay. So if you have a failed motherboard and you check the 3.3 volt in the pin number 8 of the BIOS and you find it good, you check the clock, you find it good, means you have problem with the firmware inside the BIOS. You should flash or program the BIOS and you will solve the problem. Hi again. So in this lecture, we're going to see the BIOS chip pin configuration. We're going also to see how to download the circuit diagram of every BIOS chip you want. We're going also to see the schematic of the BIOS chip, and of course we will see some real BIOS chip in the motherboard, and we will use the multimeter to check its pins, to check the VCC pin, and of course to check the ground pin, etc. So let's get started. So as you can see here, this is 8-pin BIOS chip, as you can see. But first, I will show you how to download any BIOS chip you want. So let's assume that, for example, we have a BIOS chip with this reference 25Q16BVS. IG. Okay, so here we have 16, so this is the size of the BIOS chip. So 16 in megabit. So 16 in megabit equal to 2 megabyte, as we have seen in the previous lecture, where we discussed about the BIOS chip sizes. So let's go to Google and type this reference 25Q16BVS IG and then press enter. So as you can see here, we have the first result. We have here 25Q16BVS IG. So let's get to this first result. So here we have the same reference, as you can see here. So this is 16 megabit serial flash memory, as you can see. So 16 megabit means 2 megabytes. Okay, so let's go here and download the data sheet. So let's just click here, download. So here we go. Here we have the file, as you can see. So we have 25Q16BV, as you can see also here, we have the 25Q16BVS or BVF. This is interchangeable. FIG or BVSIG, no problem, because this is the interchangeable. Okay, all these are interchangeable. This BIOS reference BVSIG is the interchangeable with this. Okay, so now let's see the pin configuration. As you can see here, this is the table of content where we have all about this BIOS. We have here the pin configuration. As you can see, you can read about every pin, its working principle. Okay, so let's go directly to the pin configuration. Okay, so here, as you can see, we have the features. As you can see here, this is 25Q16BV. As you see, 16 megabit or 2 megabyte, as I told to you. Okay, so because 8 bit equal 1 byte, so this is a 16 megabyte or 2 megabyte. So here we have many features. As you can see, you can read all these features. And here, as you can see, we have the pin configuration of this BIOS. Okay, so this is the pin number 1. Always we have this mark here in the pin number 1. Okay, this is the pin number 2. As you can see, this is input output. Data, as you see, DO means data output. Okay, here we have the WP, the write protect. Okay, here we have the ground. Always the BIOS chip in the pin number 4 is connected to the ground. We will see this in the motherboard. Okay, in a real motherboard. So here we have pin 5, we have DI. This means data in. Okay, so data out and data in here. Here we have the clock. Okay, this is for synchronization. This is the clock. Every IC should receive a clock signal. Okay, for the synchronization. Okay, so this is the clock. Here we have the hold for input output. And here this is the VCC. Always the 8-pin BIOS is powered in the pin number 8. So in the motherboard, when you want to check whether the BIOS is received the power or not, you should check the pin number 8. And you have to find 3.3 volt. Okay? When you plug the adapter in the power jack of the laptop motherboard, you should go directly to the BIOS and you should find 3.3 volts in the pin number 8 without powering on the laptop. Okay, So this is the pin configuration. So here, as you can see in this table, this is the pin description, as you can see. Okay, so always the pin number 1 is, as you can see, this is chip select. Pin number 2, as you can see, this is data output. So always in the pin number 1, we have the chip select, as you can see. The CS means chip select input. This is the data output, as you can see. This is the write protect input. Always in pin number 4 we have ground, data input, as you can see in pin number 5. We have clock in pin number 6, serial clock, as you can see, hold in pin number 7, and the power supply, as you can see here in the pin number 8, VCC. Okay? So now I will show you the schematic of the BIOS in a real laptop schematic. So this is a laptop schematic, no matter the type of the laptop, because I teach to you the working principle. If you complete this course, you will learn the working principle of how you can flash the BIOS, what is the BIOS, the pin configuration of the BIOS, the schematic of the BIOS, etc. So the working principle is the same. If you get and understand this course, you will understand any schematic and any pin configuration of any BIOS chip. Okay? So for example, here we have the table of content for this schematic. As you can see here, let's check for the BIOS. Here we have the ICH. As you can see here, we have the DC battery changer, select battery connector, the system power 3 volt, 5 volt. Here we have the processor, the GMCH, the DDR. This is the RAM. So here we have LCD connector. This is the ICH or the circuit bridge. We have the SPI. SPI means the BIOS chip. Okay. So here we have the Super IO, as you can see. So always the BIOS is near of the Super IO and also near of the ICH. So the BIOS is in page 38. So let's go to page 38. Here we go. So let's zoom in a little bit. So as you can see here, so this is the BIOS, as you can see, the same pin configuration. Okay, we have here, so the output signal, this is the write protect, this is the VSS, always connected to the ground. Here, of course, this is another type of BIOS in this schematic. This is not a wind bond, this is SST 25L F080A. So this is another type of BIOS, but as I told you, the working principle is the same. This course will teach you how you can deal with the BIOS, how you can program and reprogram any BIOS you want. Okay, so as you can see, the pin number 4, as I told you, is always connected to the ground. So here, as you see, we have pin 5. Okay, we have here the clock, the hold, and the VDD. As you can see, we have 3 volts. Always in pin number 8 you should find 3 volts. Okay, so as you can see in this laptop motherboard, this is the BIOS. As you can see here, we have this dot, means this is the pin number 1. Okay, pin number 2, 3, pin number 4. Always the pin number 4 is connected to the ground. We will check it. Pin number 5, 6, 7, and 8. 8 always is connected to the VCC. So to check the BIOS, let's use the multimeter. Let's first put the multimeter selector to the buzzer option, as you can see here, and or to the continuity option, and then press the power button. Okay, so as I told to you, always the pin number 1, we have pin number 1, 2, 3, always the pin number 4 is connected to the ground. So let's check pin number 4, as you can see here. Let's check first the continuity. The continuity is seated correctly. So I will put the read probe into pin number 4 and then the other probe in the ground, as you can see. So as you can see in the multimeter, low resistors means the pin number 4 is connected to the ground. The pin number 8 should not be connected to the ground because the pin number 8 is connected to the power rail, as you can see. It's not connected to the ground. Okay, so we have here another BIOS. As you can see here, we have this whole head, means this is the pin number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's check the pin number 4. Always the pin number 4 should be connected to the ground, as you can see. And here we have the pin number 8, where we should check whether we have 3 volt or not when you plug the power jack here in the power jack, or when you plug the adapter in the power jack. Okay, so what you should remember is that the power or the BIOS chip is always near to the ICH or to the Super IO. As you can see here, we have the Super IO. Directly under the Super IO, as you can see, we have the BIOS, as you can see here. Okay, so and the BIOS, the 8-pin BIOS that is used frequently in the motherboards, composed of 8 pin. Always the pin number 4 is connected to the ground and the pin number 8 is connected to the VCC. Okay? Hi again. So in this lecture we're going to see the BIOS faults. So the first fault is the computer won't start. So even if you press the power button but the computer won't start, this failure is one among the BIOS failure. Of course, after checking the power for the computer, for example, if you have a laptop, you should check the adapter. If you find that the adapter is good, so the BIOS can be the first cause of this failure. The second failure is the black screen. When the laptop is on, but the screen still black, no data in the screen, means the probable cause of the failure is the basic input-output system, the BIOS. You should reprogram it. So of course, for the black screen, there is many reasons. For example, problem in the RAMs, in the random access memory. The problem can be also in the graphic card. But if you check the random access memory and all things in the computer seems to be good, then the problem is in the BIOS. You should flash the BIOS using a new program. The third fault is the BIOS errors. When you get a lot of errors while you start your computer, means you have a failed BIOS. The fourth fault of the BIOS is the computer won't start and the power leads or the caps locks lead blank. When you have the power lead blank or the caps lock lead blank, means you have probably a failed BIOS. Okay? The next fault is the dead motherboard. If you have a dead motherboard, when you press the power switch or the power button, but you didn't get any response, no light, no indication in the computer, means the probable cause of failure is the BIOS. You should reprogram your BIOS. Of course, you should first check your adapter. If you have a laptop, you should always check your adapter, especially if you don't install the battery. Okay? When you have a good adapter or a good battery and the computer won't to start up, means the problem is in the BIOS. You should reprogram it. Of course, I will show you in the next lectures how to program the BIOS step by step. Okay? The next failure of the BIOS is no data in the computer screen. This failure is the same failure as the black screen, but sometimes you can get a black screen or a white screen, okay, or even a blue screen, etc. When you get this kind of screens with no data in it, the BIOS probably is the cause of this failure. So you should reprogram the BIOS. And of course, in the next lectures, I will show you how to reprogram the BIOS and how to back up the software in the BIOS first. Because always you should make a backup of your BIOS before reprogramming it, because you can need this backup again. Okay? So the next failure of the BIOS is beeps. when you hear a lot of beeps, maybe 2, 3, 4, or even 5, when you start the computer, maybe the problem can be in the BIOS. But first, you should check the RAM, the random access memory slot. So if you find that the random access memory slot is installed correctly, okay, and you should check also the hard disk drive and also the CMOS battery, all connectors in the motherboard. And you should check that the power is good in the whole motherboard. And if you check all this component, the RAM, the HDD, hard disk drive, the CMOS battery, all connectors, the power is good in the motherboard, and the failure still persists, I mean always the beeps still persist when you start up your computer, means you have the problem in your BIOS. You should flash your BIOS. The next failure is when you check all voltages in the motherboard, you find that all voltages are present. You find the 19 volt, you find the 3 volt and 5 volt. Computer is on, all voltages are present. The 5 volt for the USB connector, the 3 volt are present in the pin number 8 of the BIOS. You find all voltages, but the computer still not on the screen, still black screen or white screen. This is a good sign that you have the problem in the BIOS. You should remove your BIOS and flash it or reprogram it using the programming, and then the computer will work fine. So this is the most important and the most BIOS failure that you will get during repairing. If you get one of this failure that we discussed, you should reprogram the BIOS. But the first thing to do is to back up the BIOS. So we will see all this in the next lectures. Hi and welcome again. We're going to discuss the BIOS or Basic Input Output System program. So let's get started. So as you know, there is many kind of BIOS programmer that you can use. Okay, there is, for example, this kind of programmer, as you can see here in the picture. We have also this kind of programmer, as you see. Okay, so let's go to Google, where I will show you the programmer. So we can just type here BIOS programmer, as you can see. Okay, so let's check. So as you can see here, for example, in the first result, we have here the Amazon. Okay, so let's check this website, the Amazon store. So as you can see, the first result, for example, we have this programmer, as you can see, the TL866-2 plus programmer, USB EEPROM flash BIOS programmer. Okay, we have here also the same programmer, as you can see, TL866. So this programmer, this is a simple programmer and easy to understand. So this programmer is easy to use. Here we have another programmer, as you can see here. This is like the USB key, okay, with main adapters, as you can see, and this clip. So using this programmer here, you can program the BIOS without removing it from the motherboard because of this clip, as you can see. So let's see this program first. So let's check this. So let's check this program. So as you can see here, so this is the programmer here. Here we have the USB cable. Okay, so this USB cable is used to connect between the programmer and the laptop. Okay, as you can see. And here we have adapters. This is main adapters that you can use. Of course, these adapters support many kind of BIOS, the BIOS with 8 pins, BIOS with 16 pins, the old BIOS, etc. Okay, and of course here we have extractor. This black tool is extractor. Okay, So let's check the other program, for example. So let's check, for example, this that have the clip. So let's check it. So as you can see here, we have its characteristics. Here, this is the price. So let's check. So as you can see here, this is the program. As you can see, this is like a USB key. Okay, here we have adapters, as you can see. Also those are adapters, as you can see. And here we have the clip. This clip is used to connect between the programmer and the BIOS itself. Let's see, for example, here another picture. So this picture, as you can see, so here we have the programmer that is connected to the laptop. Okay, the USB key. Okay, so here we have cable. Here we have the clip, as you can see. Do you see the clip? Do you see the clip is connected to the BIOS directly in the motherboard without removing the BIOS. Okay, so this kind of programmer, you can reprogram the BIOS without removing it from the motherboard. Okay, so as you can see, this is the clip. As you can see here, this is the clip. Okay, so this is the cable, and here we have the adapters. Okay, so now let's check this programmer, the first programmer. Let's look for its software and the ICs supported by this kind of programmer, TL866. So we can just go to Google and type TL866 programmer and press enter. So as you can see, let's check this, the first results. As you can see here, this is the TL866. Let's go to download. So here we have TL866 program. Okay, so here we have TL866 program application software. This is the software. Okay, you can just click over here to download the software. Okay, let's download its software over here. So as you can see here, the software is now downloaded, Minipro. So we can go and check the software. So as you can see, I have here the software is downloaded. As you see, Minipro. So when you open the software, it's look like this. I can even run it. So I have already installed the software. As you can see, Minipro program. So let's double click. As you can see, so this is the software of this kind of program, as you can see. So here you can select, as you can see, the kind of the BIOS you want to reprogram. As you can see, 8-pin, 16-pin, or ever. You can just click detect to detect the BIOS that is connected to the programmer. So here you can read the BIOS. So to program it, you can click here and then program the BIOS. Okay, here we have other many features, as you can see, like blank check. Okay, we have the field buffer, multi-programmer. You can even program many BIOSes, many devices, etc. Okay, so this is the software. Okay, here of course you can check the BIOS IC, the type of BIOS IC you have. For example, let's look for example, the win bond. For example, let's type here, for example, W. So and check. So this is it, win bond, as you can see. And here of course you can check the reference of your IC over here and just click select. Okay, so this is the BIOS software that we will see in detail in the next lectures. We'll discuss all these options and features, etc. Okay, in the next lectures. Okay, so here, as you can see, here we have the TL866 IC supported list. So let's check the supported list, as you can see here. So as you can see, we have here the TL866 high performance universal USB programmer device support list. So this is its version. So this is supported devices, more than 14,000 pieces. Okay, so the supported operating system, about all operating system, we have Windows 2000 XP, 2003, 2008 Vista, Windows 7, 3264-bit, Windows 8 and Windows 10. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the supported ICs or devices. Okay, all these are BIOS chip, and of course using this programmer you can reprogram the BIOS chip for laptop, for computer, and even for television and other devices. Okay, here we have thousands of ICs here. Okay, of course you can reprogram the BIOS using any program you want. This is just an example. We studied just this program just as example. Okay, and here we have the programmer universal manual. Okay, if you want to read it. Okay, so let's go to the Amazon, as you can see. So this is just an example. Okay, so we see just this TL866. This is just an example, but you can choose any program you want, as you can see. Okay, so you can even go and check another platform. For example, here we have, for example, this AliExpress. For example, let's check this, for example. So here we have BIOS programmer kit. As you can see, this is the USB-K programmer, and as you can see here we have TL866, the same programmer as we have seen before. Okay, we have Minipro. So you have the choice. So anyway, the programmer is the tool that you should use to reprogram the BIOS. So as we have seen in this lecture, for some programmers like the TL866 that we have seen, you should remove first the BIOS from the motherboard and then connect it to the adapter, okay, in the of the programmer, and then flash it. But for some other programmer, you can reprogram the BIOS directly from the motherboard without removing it, using the clips, as you can see, using like this clip. Okay? Hi again. So in this lecture, we're going to see what we will need to program a BIOS chip. So as you can see here in the picture, this is the BIOS chip here. Okay? So what is the things that we will need to program it? So for the BIOS chip, you can find usually the BIOS chip that is used in the motherboards is the BIOS chip with 8 pins, as you can see. But you can find also other BIOS chip, for example, like this BIOS chip, or even an SMD BIOS chip. But as I told to you, this is the most BIOS chip that is used in the motherboards, as you can see here. So let's see what is the things that we will need to program the BIOS. So as you see here, we have 4 things here. We have the BIOS chip, the programmer, the Minipro software, and the bin files. We will see all this step by step. So the first thing that you should have is the BIOS chip that you want to program. The second thing is the programmer itself, as you can see. So this is one kind of the programmer, as you can see. So the programmer is the tool that you should use to program the BIOS. Of course, the programmer has other accessories that we're going to see in the next lecture step by step. It has the USB cables, some adapters, BIOS chip extractor, and other accessories. We're going to see all this step by step. So of course you can find another programmer like this. As you can see, this is another programmer in the shape of the USB. Okay, as you can see, of course this programmer also has many accessories. Anyway, we will see all this in the next lectures. Okay, so we have seen the BIOS chip, the programmer, and the third thing is the Minipro is the software. Okay, so for every programmer it has a software that you will use to program the BIOS chip. As you can see, for example, this is a Minipro. This is a software for a Minipro programmer. As you can see, it looks like this. As you can see, this is just an example of software, but this is the software that the most technicians use. As you can see, here we have Minipro, here we have file, select IC. So here, over here you can select the IC. We will see all this in the next lectures, step by step. You can read using this button, you can program using this button, etc. We're going to see all this in detail. Of course, the programmer is an executive file, as you can see. So, as you can see here, application, exe. So the programmer, as you can see, is an executive file that you can execute and install in your computer. Next, you should have the files, the bin files or the binary files. So let's check. As you can see, so we have the IC chip that we want to program, the programmer, and the software that we will use to program the chip, the BIOS chip. So the firmware, as you can see, this is the firmware. As you can see, for example, as you see, its extension is bin file. So let's check properties. As you can see, so as you can see here, not executive file, no, this is a bin file. Okay, means a binary file. So for example, I have here two bin files. This is for the HP Pavilion DV6. As you can see, here we have the type is bin file, as you can see. Okay, and here the size. As I told you, this file is with the size of 4 megabyte. As you can see, 4 megabyte, 4096 kilobytes equal to 4 megabytes. Okay, so as you can see here, this is the reference of the chip. We have here 25Q32. As you see, 32 means 4 megabyte, as we have seen in the previous lecture, because 32 divided by 8 equal 4. Okay, and here, as you can see, for 4, as you can see before, 4 megabit means 512 kilobytes. Okay, for every laptop and every computer, it has its firmware. Okay, so let's take a look inside the firmware. So let's open this firmware, for example, using the Notepad++. As you can see, this is the firmware. It's unreadable. You cannot read this firmware, okay? But the programmer can read this and can understand this, okay? So this is the firmware, okay? And I want to add that for every laptop and every BIOS chip, it has its firmware. For example, this firmware is for the HP Pavilion DV6. So if you want, for example, a firmware for example, for Dell laptop, for example, you can just type in Google Dell, the model of laptop and firmware, BIOS firmware, and you can download the firmware with the bin extension, okay, and program your BIOS chip. Of course, you should have the programmer and the software. Okay, so let's summarize. So to program a BIOS chip, you will need first the BIOS chip itself, the programmer, the software, okay, and firmware or the bin file. Okay. Hi again. So now we're gonna see in this lecture the software that is used to program or to flash the BIOS chips. So as you can see here, let's see the software. As you can see, this is the Minipro software. Of course, this is a simple software that you can understand easily. So as you can see here, this is the software. So now I will show you how to download this software, and I will show you all the characteristics and options in this software. Okay, of course you can use, there is many softwares that you can use to reprogram or to flash the BIOS IC. But we will focus on the software because it is simple and very easy to understand. And of course, the working principle is the same with all softwares, okay? And of course, with all programs. So here we have the zip file of the software where we have the executive file, but I will show you how to download this software, okay? So you can just go to Google and write Minipro programmer, exactly as we have here. So Minipro programmer software download. So let's click here. So as you can see, let's select the first result as we have here, download software. So as you can see, we have here many programmer, of course. Okay. So for example, this is a very easy programmer. So as you can see, we have TL866 programmer. Okay, so this is it, as you can see, this program, as you can see. So this is the programmer, as you can see here, the Minipro. Okay, so this is the programmer. So here for this programmer, as you can see, you can choose any program you want, but for me, I find that this is a very simple program and easy program that supports a lot of ICs. Okay, so here, as you can see, you can download its software here. As you see, the TL866 programmer application software. There is two languages, Chinese and English. This is the version 6.85. You can just click here to download it. As you can see, now the software is in downloading. As you see, .rar. This is a zip file that you can extract after that in order to get an executive file. Here, as you can see, we have the IC supported list. Let's check this list. So here in this list, as you see, we have the TL866. Okay, this is a high performance universal USB programmer. Of course, this programmer supports the USB cable, device support list. So here we have the software version, we have the supported devices. As you can see, here we have 14,036 pieces. Okay, this is the supported operating system. As you can see, we have Windows 2000 XP, 2003, 2008, Vista, Windows 7, 22 and 64-bit, Windows 8 and Windows 10. So all operating systems are here. Okay, so you can even press, as you can see, Ctrl F to search supported list. So you can even press Ctrl F from the keyboard and write any reference of the BIOS chip here, and then you will find it. Okay, so here this is the features, as you can see here. So as you can see here, as you see, device supported list. As you see, I have here many ICs chip. See a lot of references here, as you can see. This is, as you can see, many references. As you see, we have ACT, we have Advanced Group. Okay, as you can see, Alliance, AMD. As you see, we have AMEC, Winbond, Intel, A+ Flash, HTML, a lot of ICs, as you can see. So this program supports a lot of thousands of ICs, as you can see here. You can use even this program not only to program the BIOS ICs for the laptop and for the computer, but also for televisions. So now let's go to check our software. So I have my software here is downloaded. Okay, so you can just right click on the software and then extract the software, as you can see. Now I extract the software, so let's go inside, and as you can see here, this is the Minipro application. So double click here and you will install the software. For me, I already installed the software, so I will open it. So as you see, so this is the software we have here in Minipro version 6.85. So here we have this tabs: file, select, project, device, tools, help, language. Okay, of course we have English and simple Chinese. So here, as you can see, you can just click here, select. Okay, so you can select here, as you see, 8-pin IC or 60-pin IC as you want. Okay, so as you can see here, because we find, as you see, some ICs with 8 pin and others with 60 pins, 16 pins, as you can see. But of course, this program will support a lot of ICs, not also this kind of ICs. Okay, or you can just connect the IC to the program and click detect here. Okay, click detect in order to detect the kind or the type of IC. Okay, so here, as you can see, we have here, as you can see, read ID. When you connect the IC, you can just click ID here and you will read the ID of the IC. So here, as you can see, this is verify. You can use this to verify the IC. Okay, but first you should go here. Okay, go here and choose the IC you want. You can use this box to look for the IC that you want. Okay, as you can see here, we have a lot of company. For example, we can choose Intel company and then go, for example, and choose whatever you want here. Okay, or you can go to Win Bond, for example, this, and of course go, for example, as you see, we have here many kind of ICs. So for example, here we have W25Q32FV. So if we check this, for example, 32 means 4 megabyte. The size of IC is 4 megabytes. So let's press select. Okay, as you see. So then you can go, for example, and click read. And if you press read, you will read the IC and make a backup. Okay, so by clicking read. Okay, here to program the IC, you can just click here. So using this, you will program the IC. Okay, so here, as you see, the erase chip, you can use this to erase chip. Okay, you can erase the chip, but I advise you, before erasing the chip, you should first read the contents or the software, read the instructions that is in the chip IC and make a backup. Then you can erase it or program it. Okay, so here, as you can see, this is multi-program. You can program many devices, as you can see. Device 1, we have here 4 devices. You can program many devices, as you can see. So of course here file, you can save here your file. When you read a file, you can save it to make a backup. Here we have select. You can select any type of IC. Here we have project, device. From here also you can read or verify or program or erase or blank checker. Okay, we have also multi-program. Here we have some tools, as you can see, calculator, system safe check. You can check the chip IC. We have help and language. Okay, and when you click this, you will get all the information about the IC. Of course, here we have some options: erase before, verify after. If you check this, After programming the IC, it will verify it that it is okay or not. And here, if you check this, before programming the IC, it will be erased first and then programmed and then verified. Okay? So for example, let's select a firmware, for example, and check. So let's go to File, for example, and then Open. I can just go to Desktop, and then here we have some bin file. Let's check this. So bin files. So let's check this, for example, as you can see. Open. So here we have file load option, binary or Intel hex. So I will choose binary because this is a bin format. Okay, and then press OK, as you can see. Now this is my file, as you can see here. This is the instructions. FF means empty. Okay, so as you can see, do you see? This is the program, as you can see here. All this are the firmware. If you have a cracked firmware, if there's just a change here in these numbers and instructions, means the firmware is cracked. You should reprogram the BIOS IC. You see? This is the firmware. Okay? Hi again. So, in this lecture, we're going to see how to reprogram or flash the BIOS chip step by step. So, I will explain to you how to program the BIOS, a failed BIOS, in the computer, because I didn't receive yet my new programmer, okay? So my old programmer is failed, so I still waiting until I receive my new programmer, okay? So now I will explain to you and I will teach you how to flash the BIOS step by step in the computer. Just follow me and you will understand everything, okay? And the working principle is the same. By understanding this course, you can flash any BIOS using any programmer, okay? Because the working principle is the same. Always we have the programmer, the software, the firmware, and the BIOS chip. And of course, the cable, the USB cable that connects between the computer and the programmer. Okay, so let's get started. So, to program a BIOS, we need 4 things. We need first the BIOS itself, okay, the BIOS IC. So, the BIOS IC, we should remove it from the motherboard. This is the BIOS IC. Let's assume that this BIOS is a failed chip. Okay, so we should remove it from the motherboard, okay, and then install it in each support and then install the support in the EEPROM. So we need first the BIOS IC, and we need the programmer, okay, and the software. Okay, so the software is an application that can help us to transfer the firmware from the laptop, the computer, to the BIOS IC. Okay, so here the firmware is in the computer, and of course via the software we will transfer this firmware to the BIOS IC, and then we will go and install the BIOS IC in the motherboard, and the motherboard will work fine. So we need 4 things: the IC, the programmer, and the software and the firmware. Okay, so of course, using this kind of programmer, as we have seen before, you should remove the BIOS IC. But using this kind of programmer, as you can see, this programmer that contain this clip, as you can see here, the clip contain here adaptation, as you can see, that you can install directly in the BIOS IC. Okay, so using this programmer, as you can see, you can flash it or program the IC without removing it from the motherboard. Okay, because of this clip, as you can see. Okay, so of course the programmer contain many accessories, as you can see here. So the first accessory, as you can see, is the software. So for example, for this kind of programmer, as we have seen before, the TL866, you will get with the programmer the software, as you can see in the CD-ROM. Okay, you will get the software here in the CD-ROM, or if you want, you can download it from the internet. And of course, you will get with the programmer many adapters, as you can see. You will get many adapters, not just two adapters, but many adapters. So you will get 8-pin adapters for 8-pin BIOS, 16-pin adapters, and even other adapters that you can use with other kind of BIOSes, like the old BIOSes. Okay, you will get also the USB cable, as you can see. This USB cable, use it to connect the programmer to the laptop. Okay, use it to connect the programmer to the laptop. And of course, you will get the extractor. So this is the extractor that you can use to extract and to install the BIOS in the adapters. Okay, so of course, after connecting between the programmer and the laptop, and then you put the BIOS chip in the EEPROM, you install it. Okay, then you can launch your program. You can go to the software and choose program, and then the program will pass. When you program the BIOS, this, as you can see here, in the EEPROM, there is two LED. This LED is for the power, and the second LED is for run. Once you launch the program process, this LED will be eliminated, the run LED, until you get here finish, or the BIOS programmed successfully. Okay, so now I will go right now and explain to you the software interface. Okay, so as you can see, this is the software interface. As you can see, we have the Minipro version 6.85. Okay, so we have here tabs. This is the file tab that you can use to open or save, copy or paste, etc. The firmwares, here we have select. Over here, of course, you can select which IC, BIOS IC you will use. For example, here we have 8 pins or 16 pins, as you can see. So here we have project, you can open a project or save it. Here we have device, you can read or verify or program. So you can use this tab to program the BIOS, or even you can use this here, this button here. As you can see, here we have P means programmer, here we have read. Okay, the same button as we have here. So read, verify, you can verify the BIOS, the firmware in the BIOS, program the BIOS, blank check, serial number of the BIOS, multi-program, you can just click here to program many BIOSes in the same time. Of course, you can use also this, as you can see, multi-program, this button here. Okay, so here we have tools. This is some tools like calculator, like system self check, okay, help and language. So here, as you can see, we have other buttons here. As you can see, for example, this is blank check. Here we have auto 25 select. Here we have to verify. You can just click here and click verify in order to verify the BIOS chip. Okay, so here you have fill. As you see, fill buffer, you can fill the buffer. For example, you can pick an address, for example, and go, as you say, start address and end address value. You can fill the address with this value. For example, here we have addresses. Okay, if you want to change some values in the firmware. Okay, so here, as you can see, you can read. So you can read, as you see, this is a very important button here. So Before programming any BIOS, you should first read it and then make a backup. Okay. Once you click read, as you can see here, I have device unavailable because I didn't connect any BIOS. Okay, so once you click read, the firmware will be uploaded here, and then you can make the backup. Okay, you can make the backup of this firmware and of course save the firmware. So here, as you see, program. So this is the button that you can use to program, as you can see, the IC. So once you click program, the IC will be programmed. Okay, and here, of course, if you want to program many ICs in the same time, as you see, device 1, device 2, 3, and 4. Okay, you can press program device 1, etc. Okay, here, by clicking here, you will get all informations about the IC that is installed. And of course here you can here select the IC that you want, for example. Okay, you can select the IC you want. For example, you can check the company you want. For example, let's check, for example, Intel. Let's write here Intel, for example. We have here Intel company, as you can see, and then look for the reference of your BIOS, as you can see, and then press select, as you see. Okay, or you can just go and detect your IC. Okay, so that's all about how to program the BIOS. So it's pretty easy. So to summarize, if you have a failed BIOS chip, and depending on the program you have. So if you have the program, for example, TL866, like this programmer, you should remove the IC from the motherboard and then connect it to its adapter and then program it by connecting the programmer to the laptop and by launching the software. Okay, and then you can program the IC. But if you have a programmer like this that have the clip, you can program your BIOS without removing it from the motherboard. You can just connect this clip to the BIOS in the motherboard and connect this EEPROM, as you can see, or this programmer to the USB of the laptop and launch the software, and then you can program the BIOS. So it's pretty easy. Okay. Hi again. So now in this lecture, I'm going to teach you how to download any BIOS manual or circuit diagram. So as you can see, let's for example say that we want to download the circuit diagram or the manual for this BIOS chip. As you can see, we have here 25Q16 BVSIG. Okay, so 16 means 2 megabytes. So we can just go to Google, as you can see, and then type 25Q16 BVSIG. Okay, and then press enter. So as you can see here, the first result we have 25Q16 BVSIG memory datasheet. So let's click here, as you can see. So here, as you can see, we have the datasheet of this BIOS reference, as you can see here. So this is a 16 megabyte or a 16 megabit serial flash memory, as you can see here. Okay, so here we can download the datasheet here, as you can see. I can just press this link, as you can see, and the download will start. So as you can see, this is the manual for this BIOS. As you can see, we have two types of BIOS. We have 8-pin BIOS and 16-pin BIOS, as you can see. Okay, this is 16 megabit serial flash memory. 16 megabit means 2 megabytes, okay? Because 8-bit equal 1 byte, okay? So we can just click here and you can download the manual. As you see, now the manual is in downloading. Okay, I can also go here. For example, let's check this result also. As you can see, also the same working principle, the datasheet for the 25Q16 BVS IG wind bond flash memory. As you can see, this is it. Okay, and here, as you can see, we have the download, the file. You can download it also here. So I will show you another website that I use frequently. This is it, all datasheet. Here also you can download any datasheet you want of any IC you want. Okay, so here you can just type here the reference of the IC and then search. So as you can see, this is 25Q16 BVS IG. Let's click here. Okay, so we have the file is ready, the same file as you can see. So we can just click here, download, as you can see, and then we have the datasheet. Okay, so this is the way that you can use to download any IC datasheet. Okay, you can even write here the reference. For example, let's write another reference. For example, 25Q64. For example, we look for a BIOS chip with 64 megabits. 64 megabit means 8 megabyte. Okay, so let's just click search. So as you can see here, we get a lot of references. Okay, as you see, we have here a lot of references. For example, this, you can just click here and download it. 1 megabit means not the size of the BIOS. No, this is the size of the file. As you see, 68 megabit serial flash memory with DL and quad SPI. So 64 megabit means 8 megabyte, as we have seen in the previous lectures. Here we have 3 volts. Of course, all chip ICs or the BIOS chip has as the power as VCC 3 volt. Okay, so you can choose any one of here, any one you want here, and then click the file. As you can see, then click here. Okay, as you can see, we get the file. As you can see, the file now is ready. You can just read the file here, as you can see, or click download to your computer, as you can see. Okay, hi again. So in this lecture we're going to summarize what we have seen before. So we have seen in the first lecture, we have seen the definition of the BIOS, and we have seen that the BIOS is a program that is charged to start the computer system after it is powered on. Okay, and we have seen that it is also manages the data flow between the computer and the Windows or the operating system, and of course with attached devices like keyboard, mouse, printer, hard disk drive, optical disk drive, etc. We have seen that the BIOS is a group of instructions on how to check the computer hardware. And after that, we have seen an overview about the basic input-output system. So we have seen that there is a lot of types of BIOS, so like Win, Bond, like Intel, like HTML, etc. And we have seen that the very common used BIOS is the BIOS with 8 pins. Okay, and also the pin number 1, as you can see here, is marked with this dot here, and the pin number 4 is always connected to the ground, and the pin number 8 is always connected to VCC or 3.3 volt. Okay, the BIOS sizes, and I teach you that in order to know about the BIOS sizes, you should read the reference above the body of the BIOS. So here we have the sizes. When you find 1 in the reference, that means the size of BIOS is 128 kilobytes. So 2 megabit means 256 kilobytes. 4, when you find 4, that means 512 kilobytes. But this here, those values are the value that is commonly used in BIOSes. Okay, so when you find 8 megabit in the BIOS, when you find, for example, 25Q8 or 16 or 32 or 64 megabit, that means this values. So 8 megabit equal 1 megabyte. 16 megabit equal 2 megabyte. 32 megabit equal 4 megabyte, and 64 megabit equal 8 megabyte. You know why? Because 8 bit equal 1 byte. Okay, that's why when we convert from the megabit to megabyte, we divide it by 8. Okay, so of course here we have other values like 128 megabit that equals to 60 megabytes, and 256 megabits equal to 32 megabytes. Okay, then we have seen the BIOS pin configuration, as you can see, and I teach you how you can download the BIOS manual or datasheet from the internet. And of course I show you a lot of websites that where you can download this datasheets just for free. Okay, so this is one kind of datasheet. As you can see here, we have a wind bond company of BIOS. As you can see, we have here, as you can see, we have 25Q says, as you can see, 25Q16 means 16 means what? Means 2 megabytes, as we have seen here. So 16 means 2 megabytes. Okay, so here you can find, of course, many shape or many type of BIOSes. This is the same BIOS but with a different pin configuration. For this BIOS, I see it contains just 8 pins, and for this it contains 16 pins. Okay, and of course here this is its datasheet where you can find everything about this BIOS. Okay, you can find all characteristics. Okay, you can find also, as you can see here, so the features, as we have seen before. Here we have 25Q16, so 16 means 16 megabit or 2 megabyte, as you can see here. Okay, so we have here the features. As you can see, this is the pin configuration. We have seen that the BIOS always in its pin number 1. As you can see, this is the, so in pin number 1, this is the chip selects input. Here we have the data output in pin number 2. In pin number 5 we have data input. Okay, so in pin 3 we have write protect, here always connected to the ground. So in pin 6 we have the clock. Okay, so in pin 7, as you can see, this is the hold, the data input output. This is the hold input output, and here the VCC, the power supply. Always the VCC for this kind of BIOSes is 3.3 volts. Okay, for the other kind of BIOSes, as you can see, with 16 pins, this is its pin configuration, as you can see. So the VCC is in pin number 2, as you can see, and here all these 4 pins means not connected. These pins are not used. Here we have the chip select. Of course, here we have hold. This is the data output. Here we have the clock in pin number 16. So data input. Okay, here all these pins are not connected. So we have ground and we have the write protect. Okay, the same pin configuration. Okay, as you can see, no connect or not connected. Okay. After that, we have seen the BIOS faults. Okay. So we have seen that among the BIOS faults, when the computer wants to start the black screen, so when the laptop is on but the screen still black, the BIOS errors, when you get a lot of errors, when you're powering on the computer and you get a black screen with many errors, so the computer won't start and the power lead or the caps lock lead blanked. Okay, of course, if you have a dead motherboard, when you press the power button, no response, but when you check the voltages, you find that all voltages are correct. Okay, you find the 3 volt, the 5 volt, the 19 volt is good in the power jack, the 3 volt is present in the pin number 8 of the BIOS. So all component, all chips, no heat, no hot chip, all components seems to be good. The motherboard is not broken. You check the connectors, you find that all the connectors is not damaged. All voltages is present, but the problem still here. The motherboard is dead, means 100% you should reprogram the BIOS. You have a corrupted file inside the BIOS, okay? So another failure now is no data in the computer screen. When you get a computer, the computer is powered on or LED are on, but no data in the screen. The screen can be a black screen, a white screen, a blue screen, a green screen, okay, but no data. This means the problem is in the BIOS. You have a corrupted file. You should reprogram the BIOS, okay? After that, the next failure is the beeps. When you power on your computer, you hear a lot of beeps. Okay? Of course, this beeps means there is a problem somewhere. But the problem can be in the RAM. Maybe the RAM chip are not installed correctly in its slots. Maybe you have a problem with the hard disk drive. Maybe the graphic card. Maybe some connectors are not connected correctly. So if you check all these accessories and all these parts, you check the memory, especially the random access memory. If you check the random access memory, you find it connected correctly to the RAM slot. You check all connectors, you check the hard disk drive, the ODD or the optical disk drive, and you find all this are correct, are installed correctly, but the beeps still here, still persist, means you should reprogram the BIOS. The BIOS file is probably corrupted, okay? Etc. Okay? After that, we have seen what we need to program the BIOS. And we have seen that the 4 major part that is important if you want to reprogram the BIOS IC is the BIOS IC itself, okay? So sometimes you should remove or you have to remove the BIOS IC from the motherboard and put it in a specific adapter and then put it in the programmer. And sometimes you can just use a clip. There is some motherboard or some programmer that contain a clip like this. So in this case, you can just let the BIOS installed in the motherboard without removing it and just go ahead and connect this clip directly to the motherboard, to the BIOS in the motherboard, and then connect the programmer to the laptop, and then you can program it. Okay? So we have, of course, we have the BIOS IC, we have the programmer and the software. So the software is here one of the main important parts, because here we have the firmware. Okay, so to transfer this firmware to the BIOS IC, of course you need the programmer and you need an interface. The interface, the software interface is this. This is the software. Through this software, this firmware will go here to the BIOS IC, and of course through the programmer. So you will need to program the BIOS, you will need the BIOS IC itself, the programmer, the software, and the firmware. The firmware is basically the serviceable file, okay? The serviceable file. So you will find this, the extension of this firmware is usually binary or hex, okay? So hex or binary, okay? So after that, we have seen the programmer, we have studying the programmer, we have studying the software, we have studying also the firmware, how to download the firmware, okay? And also I teach you how to download the software. Of course, the software comes with the programmer in a CD-ROM, but you can also download it from the internet. So we have seen how to program the BIOS chip step by step, okay? And of course, I teach you how to convert the AXA file to bin file or to binary file. So of course, to reprogram the BIOS, you will need the file or the firmware. But of course, you should look for the firmware. You can't find the firmware when you go to Google. You can just type the reference of the firmware, for example, the model of the laptop or computer, then type BIOS firmware and you can get the firmware automatically, but sometimes you cannot find the firmware with bin extension. So in this time, maybe you should buy the firmware somewhere in a website, or I teach you a trick that you can use to convert an executive file to a binary file, because executive file always exists, okay? You can just go to Google and, for example, type the model of the laptop or of the computer and drivers, and among the drivers you will find the BIOS driver, but executive file. So I teach you using some commands how to convert an executive file that has an extension, AXA extension, to a bin file or a binary file. So we have seen that you should open the CMD window, the command window. So you can just press from the keyboard Windows R, okay, as you can see, and then the run windows will be opened for you, okay. Then you can just type CMD, okay, and press enter, and you will get, as you can see, the CMD windows. And in the CMD windows, I teach you how to type or how to enter these commands. As you can see, you should type the first command is cd, then the path of the folder, then you should press enter, then you will type rename star dot star space dot star dot point bin or binary, and then press enter, and automatically the AXA file or the executive file will be converted to the bin file. Okay, I teach you also how to look for a good programmer. Okay, so here, for example, this is the Amazon website. You can just go to Google and write, for example, BIOS programmer, and you can check the big website like Amazon, like AliExpress, like Alibaba, etc. So here, as you can see, in Amazon, we have found many programmers, and we have studied this programmer, this TL866. We have seen this programmer, and we have seen that this is a very easy programmer, a very simple programmer. So this programmer contain many accessories, as you can see here. So extractor, USB cables, adapters, etc. And we have seen also another programmer that you can use to program the BIOS without removing it from the motherboard, as you can see here, using this clip. So here we have a lot of programs, as you can see. Okay, we have seen also how to download the software for the programmers and the IC supported list. Okay, so, and we have study this programmer, the TL866, we have seen that you can just click here into download to download the software, and of course we have seen the IC supported list, okay, and we find that this kind of programmer can support all operating system, okay, as you can see here. So here we have Windows 2000 XP, 2003, 2008 Vista, Windows 7 with 32-bit and 64-bit, Windows 8 and Windows 10, etc. And of course the supported devices is more than 14,000 pieces, okay. So as you can see here, a lot of thousands of ICs. So this is just one example of the programmer that we have seen, but there are a lot of programmers, so the choice is for you. You can choose any programmer you want, but for example this kind of programmer, the TL866, support a lot of ICs, so you can flash or reprogram any BIOS IC using this programmer. You can program, for example, the laptop BIOSes, the television BIOSes, and other electronic devices, okay.